What would you do if your boss asked you to kiss her in front of everyone? That's the impossible choice Logan Mercer faced one winter night at a corporate gala that would change everything. A single father, a broken CEO, one desperate request that could destroy them both or save them. This is a story about integrity, heartbreak, and the courage to choose truth over convenience. Stay with me until the very end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened next, nobody saw coming. The ballroom glittered like a jewel box, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble, the kind of extravagance that made Logan Mercer's stomach turn. He stood near the bar with a glass of sparkling water, never alcohol at company events, that was one of his rules, and watched the crowd with the practiced detachment of someone who had learned long ago that he didn't belong in rooms like this. Logan was 32 years old, broad-shouldered and solid in a way that came from carrying groceries and a 7-year-old daughter up 3 flights of stairs, not from expensive gym memberships. His suit was off the rack, pressed carefully the night before while Sophie watched cartoons in her pajamas. His watch was digital, functional. His shoes were polished but worn at the heels. He didn't care. Corporate galas were a necessary evil in his line of work as senior operations manager at Vail Industries, one of the fastest-growing tech firms on the East Coast. He attended because it was expected. He smiled when appropriate, shook hands with people whose names he'd forget by morning, and counted down the minutes until he could leave without seeming rude. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who watched Sophie on nights like this. "She's asleep. Don't rush. Take your time." Logan smiled despite himself. Sophie had probably negotiated for an extra story, maybe 2. She had her mother's gift for gentle manipulation, a thought that made his chest ache even 3 years after Emma's death. "Mercer, there you are." Logan turned to find David Thornton approaching, the VP of sales, red-faced and jovial with expensive scotch. Thornton was everything Logan wasn't: Ivy League educated, country club polished, the kind of man who wore cufflinks that cost more than Logan's monthly grocery budget. "Thornton," Logan said evenly, shaking the offered hand. "Hell of a party, isn't it?" Thornton gestured broadly at the room. "Adriana really knows how to throw a shindig. Though between you and me," he leaned in conspiratorially, whiskey thick on his breath, "I'm surprised she even showed up tonight." Logan's jaw tightened. "Why's that?" Thornton's eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. "You haven't heard? Her ex-husband is here, brought his new girlfriend. Girl's gotta be, 25? Maybe younger?" He whistled low. "Brutal stuff. Divorce isn't even final yet." Logan felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd heard office gossip about Adriana Vail's personal life. It was impossible not to in a company of 300 people, but he'd never participated in it. The CEO's private pain wasn't entertainment, regardless of what people like Thornton seemed to think. "I wouldn't know," Logan said flatly, "and I don't think it's our business." Thornton laughed, completely missing or ignoring the rebuke in Logan's tone. "Always the Boy Scout, aren't you, Mercer? That's why everyone likes you. Steady, dependable. Boring as hell, but dependable." He clapped Logan on the shoulder and wandered off toward a cluster of executives near the windows. Logan exhaled slowly, forcing down the irritation. In 6 more months, he'd have enough saved for a down payment on a real house, with a yard for Sophie. A place with good schools and safe streets. 6 more months of smiling at people like Thornton. He could do 6 more months. The orchestra shifted into something slow and elegant, couples drifting onto the dance floor in practiced pairs. Logan stayed where he was, invisible by choice, until he saw her. Adriana Vail. She stood near the far side of the ballroom, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city's glittering skyline. She wore a black evening gown that was somehow both elegant and severe, her dark hair pulled back in a style that emphasized the sharp lines of her face. Even from across the room, Logan could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she held herself. And he could see why. 10 feet away from her, near the champagne fountain, stood a man Logan recognized from company photos as Marcus Vail, Adriana's soon-to-be ex-husband. He was tall, silver-haired, distinguished in the way that came from generations of old money. The woman on his arm couldn't have been older than 27, blonde and laughing at something Marcus had just said, her hand possessive on his sleeve. Logan watched Adriana's face. To anyone else, she probably looked calm, composed, completely unaffected. But Logan had spent 3 years learning to read the smallest shifts in his daughter's expression, the tiny tells that revealed hurt beneath bravery. He recognized the same thing now in his CEO. The tightness around her eyes, the too perfect posture, the way her hands weren't quite relaxed at her sides. She was breaking apart, and no one else seemed to notice. Or worse, they noticed and didn't care. Logan could see the sideways glances, the whispered conversations behind raised champagne flutes, the board members and their spouses, the department heads and their carefully polished partners, all watching the drama unfold like it was dinner theater. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Some people treat other folks' pain like it's a TV show, Logan. Don't ever be one of those people. He wasn't sure what made him move. Maybe it was the memory of his mother. Maybe it was thinking about Sophie, about the kind of man he wanted to be when she looked at him. Maybe it was simply that Adriana Vale had always treated him with respect and dignity, had remembered his daughter's name, had approved his leave request when Sophie had pneumonia without question or hesitation. Whatever the reason, Logan set down his water glass and crossed the ballroom. He didn't have a plan. He rarely did when his conscience pushed him into action. But as he approached Adriana Vale, cutting through the crowd of people who were content to watch and whisper, he saw her notice him. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the tiniest crack in her armor. "Ms. Vale," he said when he reached her, his voice low and steady. "Mr. Mercer." Her voice was controlled, professional, giving nothing away. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Required attendance for senior management," he said. Then, because he couldn't stop himself, "Are you all right?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. For just a second, her perfect composure slipped, and he saw beneath it, not to the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected hundreds of lives, but to the woman who was holding herself together through sheer force of will. "I'm perfectly fine," she said, but they both knew it was a lie. Logan glanced toward where Marcus Vale stood with his young companion, now surrounded by a small crowd of admirers. When he looked back at Adriana, he made a decision. "Would you like to dance?" The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. He wasn't a dancer. He had 2 left feet and rhythm that Sophie charitably described as trying really hard. But he could stand on a dance floor and provide a distraction, and right now, that seemed like exactly what Adriana Vale needed. She stared at him for a long moment, and Logan wondered if he'd overstepped, if he'd just torched his career by presuming too much. Then something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but close. "Yes," she said quietly. "I would." She took his offered arm, and together they walked onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing something classical and slow, the kind of music that belonged in old movies and European palaces. Logan had no idea what it was called, but it didn't matter. He placed one hand carefully at Adriana's waist, took her other hand in his, and tried to remember the basic steps his mother had taught him before his high school prom. "I should warn you," he said as they began to move. "I'm not very good at this." "Neither am I," Adriana said, and there was something raw in her voice that made his chest tighten. "But I appreciate you trying." They swayed together, neither graceful nor particularly skilled, but managing to stay upright and in rhythm. Logan was intensely aware of the eyes on them. The entire room seemed to be watching, though whether out of curiosity or judgment he couldn't tell. "Thank you," Adriana said after a moment, so quietly he almost didn't hear her. "For what?" "For not pretending you don't see what's happening. For not acting like everything is normal." Logan looked down at her, at this woman who held the power to fire him with a word, who controlled budgets worth millions and made decisions that shaped the industry. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the smudge of makeup that hadn't quite covered the shadows beneath them. "It's not normal," he said simply. "And you shouldn't have to pretend it is." Adriana's grip on his shoulder tightened just slightly. "Everyone else seems content to watch the show." "People are cruel when they think someone else's pain doesn't matter," Logan said. The words came out harder than he intended, shaped by his own experience. He'd seen it after Emma died. The well-meaning neighbors who treated his grief like a spectacle, who asked intrusive questions and then shared the answers like gossip. "But you don't owe them a performance." "Don't I?" Adriana's laugh was bitter. "I'm the CEO. I'm supposed to be above all of this, unaffected, untouchable." "You're human," Logan said. And being hurt doesn't make you weak. The music swelled around them, and for a moment they just moved together in silence. Logan could feel the tension in Adriana's body, like a string pulled too tight, ready to snap. He'd felt that same tension in himself in the months after Emma's death, when everyone expected him to have moved on, but the grief was still fresh and raw. "Can I tell you something?" Adriana asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course." "I'm so tired, Logan." The use of his first name startled him, as did the exhaustion in her voice. "I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of pretending I don't care that he's here with her. I'm tired of letting everyone watch me like I'm some kind of cautionary tale about women who work too hard and lose their husbands." Logan's jaw clenched. "Is that what people are saying? That and worse." She looked up at him, and he saw the storm in her eyes. "Do you know what the worst part is? It's not that he left. It's that he's winning. He gets to parade his new relationship around like a trophy, and I have to stand here and act like I'm fine with it, like I've already moved on. You don't have to act like anything, but I do." Adriana's voice sharpened with something desperate. "Because if I don't, if I show even a moment of weakness, then every doubt they've ever had about me leading this company will be validated. The board is already questioning my judgment. Shareholders are nervous. And Marcus," her voice caught on his name, "Marcus gets to play the victim, the husband who was neglected by his ambitious wife, while I play the ice queen who cared more about quarterly earnings than her marriage." The music shifted, the tempo slowing even further, and couples around them pressed closer together. Logan kept a respectful distance, but his hold on Adriana remained steady. "What do you need?" he asked, because it seemed like the only question that mattered. Adriana was quiet for so long that Logan thought she might not answer. Then she said, her voice trembling just slightly, "I need them to stop looking at me like I'm broken. I need Marcus to see that I'm not sitting at home crying over him. I need everyone in this room to believe that I've already moved on, that I'm fine, better than fine." She stopped abruptly, her breath coming faster. Logan could feel her heart racing where his hand rested against her waist. "I need them to believe," she said finally, "that I'm here with someone, that I chose to be here with someone." Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. Logan's steps faltered, and they stopped moving, standing still in the middle of the dance floor while couples swirled around them. "Adriana, I know what I'm asking." She looked up at him, and the desperation in her eyes made his chest ache. "I know it's inappropriate. I know I'm your boss, and this crosses every professional boundary we have. But Logan, I am begging you. What exactly are you asking me to do?" Adriana took a shaky breath. "I'm asking you to kiss me. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. So that Marcus and the board and every person in this room who's been watching me like I'm a tragedy waiting to happen can see that I'm not alone. That I'm not pathetic, that I'm—" "Stop." Logan's voice was firm but gentle. "Just stop." He could see her gathering herself, preparing for rejection, building up the walls again. Around them, the music played on, but Logan felt like they were in a bubble, separated from the rest of the world. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. Logan thought about his daughter, asleep at home, trusting him to always do the right thing. He thought about Emma, who had always believed in leading with integrity even when it cost them. He thought about the man he'd promised himself he'd be, the example he'd vowed to set. And he thought about Adriana Vale, brilliant and broken, asking him to help her lie to the world. The answer should have been simple. This was his boss. A kiss could mean a promotion, could mean the financial security he'd been working toward for 3 years. It would cost him nothing except maybe a moment of awkwardness. But Logan had never been good at simple math when people's dignity was on the line. "Adriana?" he said quietly, aware that people were starting to notice they'd stopped dancing, that whispers were beginning to ripple through the crowd. "Can we go somewhere private? Just for a minute?" She stiffened. "You're saying no." "I'm saying this isn't the place for this conversation. There's nothing to talk about." Her voice went cold, professional again, the walls slamming back into place. "I apologize for putting you in an uncomfortable position, Mr. Mercer. It was inappropriate of me to—" "Adriana, please." Logan held her gaze, letting her see that he wasn't judging her, wasn't disgusted or shocked or any of the things she probably expected. "Trust me, just for 5 minutes. She searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her hesitate. Finally, she nodded. "The lobby," she said. "There's a private alcove past the coat check." Logan offered his arm again, and together they walked off the dance floor. He could feel every eye in the room following them, could practically hear the speculation starting. But he kept his focus on Adriana, on getting her somewhere away from the performance, the judgment, the toxic curiosity of people who'd turned her pain into their evening's entertainment. They crossed through the ballroom in silence, past the champagne fountains and the elaborate ice sculptures, past clusters of executives who stopped mid-conversation to watch them pass. Logan saw Marcus Vale's head turn, saw the flicker of something. Surprise? Concern? Cross his face as he watched his ex-wife leave with her employee. Good, Logan thought grimly. Let him wonder. The lobby was blessedly quiet, the thick carpet and heavy drapes absorbing sound. Adriana led him to a small alcove with velvet benches and soft lighting, tucked away from the main entrance. As soon as they were out of sight of the ballroom, her posture crumpled slightly, like a marionette with cut strings. "I'm sorry," she said, not looking at him. "That was unprofessional and unfair, and I put you in an impossible position." "Stop apologizing," Logan said. He sat down on one of the benches, leaving space for her to join him or not, as she chose. "You're hurting. You're allowed to hurt." Adriana stayed standing, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding her ribs together. "I'm the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I don't have the luxury of hurting." "Everyone has that luxury," Logan said quietly. "It's called being human." "Well, I can't afford to be human tonight." She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "Do you understand what it's like in there? Everyone watching, waiting to see if I'll crack. The board member's already questioning whether I can lead while going through a divorce. Marcus showing up with that girl, young enough to be his daughter, like he's proving some kind of point." "What point?" "That I failed. That I wasn't enough." Adriana's voice cracked. "That I chose my career over my marriage, and this is what I deserve." Logan stood up then, moving closer but not touching. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" She finally looked at him, and the anguish in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. "I missed anniversaries for board meetings. I canceled vacations for product launches. I was so focused on building this company that I didn't notice my marriage was falling apart until Marcus told me he was leaving. So yes, Logan, maybe I do deserve this. Maybe I deserve to stand in that ballroom and watch him with someone new, while everyone whispers about how the Ice Queen finally got what was coming to her." "Stop it." Logan's voice was sharper now. "Stop punishing yourself for other people's cruelty." "I'm not punishing myself. I'm being realistic." "No, you're performing." Logan took a step closer. "You're so worried about what everyone else thinks, about maintaining this image of perfection, that you won't let yourself feel what you're actually feeling." Adriana's laugh was bitter. "And what am I feeling, Logan, since you seem to know me so well?" "You're angry," he said simply. "You're heartbroken. You're humiliated that your ex-husband showed up tonight with another woman, making your personal life public entertainment. And you're terrified that if you show any of that, people will see it as weakness instead of what it actually is, a normal human response to betrayal and loss." She stared at him, and he saw her jaw tremble before she clenched it tight. "I can't afford weakness." "It's not weakness to acknowledge pain." "Yes, it is. Not for me. Not for women like me who have to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously." Adriana's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Do you know how many people are waiting for me to fail? How many men on that board who resented my promotion? How many investors who think a divorced woman can't be trusted to run a company? I have to be perfect, Logan. I have to be untouchable, because the moment I show vulnerability, the moment I let them see that I'm hurt, they'll use it against me." Logan understood. He'd seen it in his own career, the different standards applied to women in leadership, the impossible tightrope they walked, but understanding didn't change what he had to say next. "So you want me to help you lie?" Adriana flinched like he'd slapped her. "That's exactly what you're asking," Logan said gently. "You want me to kiss you so everyone in that ballroom believes you've moved on, that you're fine, that Marcus doesn't matter anymore. But Adriana, it's not true. And pretending it is won't make the pain go away. It'll just push it down deeper until it poisons everything else." "You don't understand." "I do." Logan's voice was quiet but firm. 3 years ago, my wife died. Emma. She had an aneurysm. One day she was making breakfast for our daughter, and the next day she was gone. And everyone, our neighbors, our friends, even my own family, they all wanted me to be okay. They wanted me to prove I was coping, that I was strong, that I was going to be fine for Sophie's sake. So I performed. I smiled at the funeral. I went back to work after 2 weeks. I pretended the grief wasn't crushing me because that's what everyone seemed to need me to do. He saw Adriana's expression shift, the defensive anger softening into something else. And do you know what happened? Logan continued. I fell apart anyway. 6 months later, I had a panic attack in the middle of a grocery store because I saw Emma's favorite cereal on sale. I broke down in my car after dropping Sophie at school because I heard her teacher playing Emma's favorite song. The grief didn't go away because I performed strength. It just waited until I couldn't hold it back anymore. Adriana sank down onto the bench, her perfect posture finally crumbling. I don't know how to not be strong. Then learn. Well, Logan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Let yourself be angry. Let yourself be hurt. Stop performing for people who don't deserve your honesty anyway. And what about my career, my reputation? What about your humanity? Logan turned to look at her fully. Adriana, you are better than this. Better than using another person to stage some performance of being over your ex. Better than hiding your pain behind a lie. You're brilliant and capable, and you've built something remarkable. Don't let Marcus take that away from you by making you into someone who uses people. The words hung in the air between them, honest and sharp. Logan half expected her to lash out, to remind him that she was his boss, to put him back in his place. Instead, Adriana made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You're refusing to kiss me, she said wonderingly. I'm refusing to help you lie to yourself. Do you have any idea what you're passing up? One kiss, Logan. That's all it would take. And after tonight, you'd be the employee who helped the CEO through a difficult time. Promotions, better projects, job security. Logan felt the weight of it, the opportunity, the temptation. He thought about the house with the yard, about Sophie's college fund, about all the things he could provide if he just said yes. Then he thought about looking his daughter in the eye and explaining why he'd done it. I have a 7-year-old daughter at home, he said quietly. And someday, she's going to be old enough to understand the choices I made. When that day comes, I want to be able to tell her that I always chose integrity over convenience, even when it cost me. Especially when it cost me. Adriana was crying now, silent tears tracking down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I don't know if I can go back in there. Then don't. She looked at him in surprise. What? Don't go back. Logan stood up and offered his hand. Leave. Go home. Stop performing for people who are treating your pain like entertainment. You don't owe them anything. But the gala will survive without you. Logan's voice was firm. Brianna, you are the CEO. You can leave whenever you want. And right now you need to leave. Not because you're weak, because you're human, and you deserve to grieve in private instead of on display. She stared at his offered hand like it was a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Then, slowly, she took it. They didn't go back through the ballroom. Logan found a side exit through the hotel's service corridor, and they walked through kitchens fragrant with catering food and past confused waitstaff until they reached the parking garage. Adriana's driver was waiting, as drivers for CEOs always were. Thank you, she said as she reached for the car door. Then she paused, looking back at him. Logan, what you said about your wife. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Not many people do, he said. I don't talk about it much, but I needed you to understand. Running from pain doesn't work. It catches up to you eventually. Adriana nodded slowly. What you did tonight, refusing me, it took courage, real courage, not the performative kind. It was the right thing to do. I know. That's what makes it remarkable. She smiled, small and sad, but genuine. I'll see you at work, Mr. Mercer. Good night, Miss Vale. Logan watched her car pull away, disappearing into the city's late-night traffic. Then he pulled out his phone and called for a rideshare, ready to go home to his daughter and the life that mattered. He didn't go back to the gala. Let them talk. Let them speculate. He'd made his choice, and he could live with it. Because somewhere in this city, his daughter was sleeping, safe and warm, dreaming whatever dreams 7-year-olds dreamed. And tomorrow morning, when she asked him how his night was, he'd be able to look her in the eye and tell her he'd done the right thing, even if it cost him everything, even if it cost him nothing at all. The truth was worth protecting. His integrity was worth protecting. And Adriana Vale, for all her power and position, had deserved honesty more than she'd deserved a performance. Logan's phone buzzed with the notification that his ride was 3 minutes away. He stood in the garage's fluorescent lighting, still wearing his cheap suit and worn shoes, and felt something settle in his chest that might have been peace. He'd chosen the hard thing, the honest thing. He'd chosen to be the kind of man his daughter could respect. And in a world that often rewarded convenience over character, that felt like victory enough. The ride home took 23 minutes through streets still wet from earlier rain, neon reflections sliding across the car windows like liquid light. Logan sat in the back seat and watched the city pass by, his mind replaying the evening in fragments, Adriana's desperate eyes, the weight of her request, the moment he'd chosen honesty over opportunity. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Sophie woke up asking for water. Back asleep now. Take your time. Logan typed back a quick thank you, then leaned his head against the cool window. The driver, a quiet woman in her 50s, didn't try to make conversation, and Logan was grateful for the silence. He needed to think, to process what had just happened and what it might mean when he walked into the office Monday morning. He'd refused his CEO. He'd walked her out of her own company gala. He'd told her she was better than using people, better than performing pain. Any one of those things could end his career. All of them together probably would. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, Logan felt a strange calm settling over his shoulders like a familiar coat. He'd made the right choice. Whatever consequences came next, he could face them knowing that much was true. The car pulled up in front of his apartment building, a modest 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was safe but not fashionable. Logan thanked the driver and climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. It was nearly midnight and the building slept around him. Mrs. Chen opened her door before he could knock, her round face creased with warmth. She was 72, a retired teacher who'd moved in next door 2 years ago and immediately adopted Sophie like a surrogate granddaughter. She was perfect, Mrs. Chen whispered, handing him Sophie's overnight bag. We made popcorn and watched that movie about the talking animals. She fell asleep during the credits. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I don't know what I'd do without you. Nonsense. That little girl is a treasure. You go check on her. I'll see you both tomorrow. Logan let himself into his apartment, locking the door behind him with the careful quietness of long practice. The living room was tidy. He'd cleaned before leaving for the gala, a nervous habit, with Sophie's coloring book stacked neatly on the coffee table and her sneakers lined up by the door. He moved down the short hallway to Sophie's room and eased the door open. She was curled under her princess comforter, dark hair spilled across her pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Emma had given her for her 4th birthday. In sleep, she looked exactly like her mother, the same delicate features, the same long lashes. Logan's chest ached with love so fierce it was almost painful. This was what mattered, not boardrooms or galas or career advancement. This sleeping child who trusted him completely, who believed he could fix anything, who thought her daddy hung the moon. He'd done the right thing tonight, for her, for himself, for the memory of the woman who'd taught him that integrity wasn't negotiable. Logan pressed a gentle kiss to Sophie's forehead and retreated to his own room, suddenly exhausted. He hung up his suit, changed into sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and fell into bed. Sleep came quickly, dreamless and deep. He woke to sunlight streaming through his curtains and the sound of Sophie singing in the kitchen. Logan checked his phone, 8:30 on a Saturday morning, and smiled despite his fatigue. His daughter had never learned the concept of sleeping in. "Daddy!" Sophie bounced into his room, already dressed in mismatched clothes she'd clearly chosen herself, purple leggings, a green t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, and her favorite sparkly shoes. "You're awake! I made breakfast!" Logan sat up, instantly alert to the potential disaster that sentence implied. "You made breakfast?" "Well, I got the cereal out. And the bowls. Mrs. Chen said I'm not allowed to use the stove yet." Sophie climbed onto his bed, settling cross-legged beside him. "How was your fancy party?" It was Interesting. Did you dance with anyone? Logan thought of Adriana in his arms, the tension in her shoulders, the desperate request she'd made. I did, actually. Sophie's eyes went wide with delight. Really? Was she pretty? She was very elegant, Logan said carefully, choosing his words. But it wasn't that kind of dancing, sweetheart. It was just work. Oh. Sophie's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, then rebounded. Well, maybe next time it can be the fun kind. Mrs. Chen says you work too much and you should go on dates. Mrs. Chen talks too much, Logan said, tickling Sophie's ribs until she squealed with laughter. They ate cereal together at the small kitchen table, Sophie chattering about her evening with Mrs. Chen and her plans for the day. She wanted to go to the library for a new book, then to the park if it wasn't too cold. Simple pleasures. Uncomplicated joy. Logan's phone rang just as they were finishing breakfast. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Adriana Vale. I need to take this, Sophie. Can you brush your teeth? Okay, Daddy. She skipped off toward the bathroom, still humming. Logan answered the call, stepping into the living room. Hello? Logan? Adriana's voice was quiet, none of the CEO authority he was used to hearing. I hope I'm not calling too early. No, it's fine. We're early risers in this house. A pause. I wanted to thank you. For last night. For... She trailed off and Logan heard her take a breath. For being honest when I needed honesty instead of enabling. Logan sat down on the couch, relief washing through him. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. What you said about performing strength instead of choosing it, I've been thinking about it all night. You were right. About all of it. How are you doing? Really? Another pause, longer this time. I'm angry and hurt and embarrassed that I asked you to do something that would have compromised both of us. But I'm also grateful. You gave me permission to stop pretending, and I didn't realize how much I needed that. Logan heard Sophie in the bathroom singing an off-key song about brushing teeth. What are you going to do? I called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. I'm going to address the situation directly instead of letting gossip control the narrative. And I'm going to take some time off. Real time off, not just working from home. My assistant nearly fainted when I told her. That sounds healthy. It sounds terrifying, Adriana corrected, but there was a thread of something lighter in her voice. But you were right about the grief catching up. I need to deal with my marriage ending instead of burying it under quarterly reports. That takes courage. So does refusing your boss when she asks you to kiss her. Adriana's tone shifted, becoming more formal. Logan, I need to be clear about something. What happened last night doesn't change our professional relationship. You're not going to be punished for doing the right thing. If anything, Please don't offer me a promotion because I didn't kiss you, Logan interrupted gently. That would make it transactional, and it wasn't. You asked. I answered honestly. That's all it was. Adriana laughed, a real laugh this time. You're a remarkable man, Logan Mercer. I'm a guy who tries to do right by his kid, that's all. No, Adriana said firmly. You're more than that. But I'll respect your wishes. I just wanted you to know you have my gratitude and my respect. They said their goodbyes, and Logan set down his phone just as Sophie emerged from the bathroom, toothpaste visible at the corner of her mouth. Was that work? She asked. Yeah, kiddo, just checking in. On a Saturday? That's silly. Sophie grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. Come on, Daddy, the library is waiting. The weekend passed in the comfortable rhythm Logan had built for them. Library on Saturday morning, park in the afternoon when the sun broke through the clouds, pizza for dinner while they watched a movie. Sunday was laundry and grocery shopping, Sophie's homework for the week ahead, and meal prep that would make the weekday mornings easier. Normal, steady, safe. But Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a storm front, and Logan dressed for work with a knot of tension in his stomach that even Sophie's cheerful breakfast chatter couldn't quite dissolve. He dropped her at school, waited until she'd disappeared into her classroom with a wave and a blown kiss, then drove to Vale Industries trying not to imagine all the ways his career might implode before lunch. The office felt different the moment he walked in. Logan couldn't quite put his finger on what had changed. The same reception desk, the same morning rush of employees grabbing coffee and heading to their desks, but something in the air felt charged, expectant. "Mercer!" David Thornton intercepted him near the elevators, coffee in hand and gossip practically radiating from his pores. "Hell of a show Friday night." Logan's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Come on. You disappeared with the CEO in the middle of the gala. Everyone's talking about it." Thornton lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Are you two—" "No." Logan's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "Ms. Vale wasn't feeling well. I helped her find a quiet place to sit. That's all." "That's not what people are saying. Then people should find something more productive to do with their time." Logan stepped into the elevator, turning to face Thornton with an expression that finally penetrated the man's oblivious good humor. "Excuse me, I have work to do." The elevator doors closed on Thornton's surprised face, and Logan exhaled slowly. So it was going to be like this. Speculation, gossip, knowing looks and whispered theories. He could handle it. He'd handled worse. His phone buzzed with a meeting notification. All staff announcement. Conference room A, 10 a.m. Attendance required. Logan's stomach sank. This was it. The board meeting Adriana had mentioned. Whatever she was planning to say, the entire company was about to hear it. The next hour crawled by with excruciating slowness. Logan tried to focus on the logistics reports on his screen, the supply chain issues that needed his attention, but his mind kept drifting to Friday night and the conversation in the hotel lobby. At 9:55, he headed to conference room A, the largest meeting space in the building. It was already packed, employees standing along the walls when the chairs filled up. Logan found a spot near the back and tried to make himself invisible. At exactly 10 o'clock, Adriana Vale walked in. She looked different. Still professional in a navy suit, her hair still pulled back in that severe style, but something in her bearing had changed. The brittle perfection was gone, replaced by something more solid, more genuine. She stepped up to the podium at the front of the room, and the murmuring conversations died away. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Adriana began, her voice calm and clear. "I'm going to address some rumors that have been circulating because I believe in transparency, and I won't allow gossip to poison this workplace." Logan felt every muscle in his body tense. "As many of you know, I'm going through a divorce. It's been finalized as of this morning, actually." Adriana's smile was small and tight. "And yes, my ex-husband attended Friday's gala with his girlfriend. It was uncomfortable. It was humiliating, and I handled it poorly." A ripple of surprise went through the room. Logan had never heard a CEO admit to handling anything poorly. "I let my personal pain interfere with my professional judgment," Adriana continued. "I put an employee in an uncomfortable position because I was more concerned with how things looked than with doing what was right. That employee showed more integrity in one evening than I've shown in months." Logan's face burned. He could feel eyes turning toward him, people connecting dots. "I'm telling you this because I want to be clear about something. The person I am at work and the person I am in my private life are not separate. I'm human. I make mistakes. I get hurt and angry and scared like everyone else. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise." Adriana's hands gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles white. "I've spent the last year trying to prove I could be the perfect CEO, unaffected by personal problems, always in control, never showing weakness. But that's not leadership, that's performance. And it ends now." The room was utterly silent. "I'm taking a leave of absence, 3 weeks, starting today. Jessica Reeves will serve as acting CEO in my absence." Adriana nodded toward her COO, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked only mildly surprised by the announcement. "When I come back, I'll be a better leader because I'll have dealt with my personal issues instead of pretending they don't exist." She scanned the room, her gaze steady. "I'm also putting the entire company on notice. Gossip stops now. Anyone caught spreading rumors about employees' personal lives, mine or anyone else's, will face disciplinary action. We're here to build great products and serve our customers, not to treat each other's lives like entertainment. Is that clear?" A murmur of assent rippled through the crowd. "Good. That's all. Get back to work." Adriana stepped down from the podium and walked out of the conference room with her head high. The moment she was gone, the room erupted in whispered conversations, but Logan didn't stay to hear them. He slipped out through the side door and headed back to his desk, his mind reeling. She'd done it. She'd actually addressed the situation directly, claimed her humanity, set boundaries. It was exactly what he'd suggested. But seeing her do it, in front of 300 employees, risking their judgment and criticism, took a kind of courage Logan could only admire. His email pinged, a message from Adriana's assistant. Ms. Vale would like to see you in her office before she leaves. Now, if possible. Logan's heart hammered as he took the elevator to the executive floor. Adriana's assistant, a young woman named Miranda, waved him through immediately. Adriana stood at her office window, looking out over the city. She turned when he entered, and Logan was struck again by how different she seemed, not diminished by her vulnerability, but somehow more substantial. "Close the door," she said. Logan did, then stood awkwardly in the middle of her office, unsure of the protocol for this situation. "That was quite a speech," he said finally. "I terrified the board," Adriana replied with a slight smile. "3 of them called for my resignation. The others talked them down, but it was close." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It needed to happen." She moved away from the window, leaning against her desk. "I called you up here because I wanted to say goodbye properly, and to thank you again. What you did Friday night, it changed something for me. It gave me permission to stop performing. You would have gotten there eventually. Maybe, or maybe I would have kept pretending until I broke completely." Adriana's expression was serious. "Logan, I meant what I said downstairs. You showed real integrity, the kind that's rare in any workplace, but especially in corporate environments where people are rewarded for playing politics. I just did what felt right." "Exactly, and that's remarkable." She pulled an envelope from her desk drawer and held it out to him. "This is a letter of recommendation, sealed, dated, and signed. If my leave of absence turns into something more permanent, if the board decides they'd rather have someone more stable, I want you to have options. Take it." Logan accepted the envelope, feeling the weight of it. "You think they'll force you out?" "I think I scared them by admitting I'm human. CEOs aren't supposed to have feelings or personal problems. We're supposed to be machines." Adriana's smile was bitter. "But I'd rather lose this job than lose myself trying to be perfect. You taught me that." "I didn't teach you anything. I just reminded you of what you already knew." "Then thank you for the reminder." Adriana extended her hand, formal and final. "Take care of yourself, Logan, and that daughter of yours." Logan shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip. "Take care of yourself too, for real this time." "I will, I promise." He left her office with the envelope in his pocket and a strange sense of closure. Whatever happened next, for Adriana, for himself, for the company, he'd done the right thing. That knowledge carried him through the rest of the day, through the curious looks and whispered conversations, through Thornton's attempts to pump him for information. Logan kept his head down and did his work, the same way he always had. Sophie was waiting at school pickup with her usual enthusiasm, backpack bouncing as she ran to the car. "Daddy, guess what? We learned about butterflies today, and Miss Peterson said we might get to watch real caterpillars turn into butterflies if our class raises enough money for the kit." "That sounds amazing, kiddo." Logan helped her buckle her seatbelt, grateful for her uncomplicated joy, for the way she could make everything feel simple and right again. "Can we help raise money? Please? I really want to see a butterfly be born." "We'll figure something out," Logan promised, pulling out of the school parking lot. They stopped at the grocery store on the way home, Sophie chattering about butterflies and metamorphosis, while Logan grabbed ingredients for dinner. He was comparing prices on pasta when his phone rang. Unknown number. Logan almost didn't answer, but something made him hit accept. "Hello? Mr. Mercer? This is Jessica Reeves, COO of Vale Industries." Logan's stomach dropped. "Ms. Reeves, how can I help you?" "I wanted to reach out personally before the official announcement goes out tomorrow. With Ms. Vale taking leave, I'm restructuring a few departments and I need someone to lead the integration project for our new manufacturing partners. It's a 6-month assignment, high visibility, and it comes with a significant salary increase." Logan stopped walking, Sophie tugging on his hand impatiently. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm offering you the position. Your work has been consistently excellent, and Adriana spoke very highly of your judgment and integrity. I need someone I can trust on this project, and you're my first choice." I don't know what to say." Say yes. Jessica's voice was brisk but warm. I'll have HR send over the details tomorrow, but I wanted to give you a heads up. You've earned this, Mr. Mercer. This has nothing to do with Friday night's events, if that's what you're worried about. Your performance speaks for itself. Logan felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Then yes. Thank you. Excellent. Welcome to the leadership team. We'll talk more tomorrow. The call ended, and Logan stood in the middle of the pasta aisle, holding his phone and feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Daddy? Sophie tugged his hand again. Are you okay? You look funny. Logan looked down at his daughter, at her concerned little face and trusting eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly knocked him over. I'm perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect. That night, after Sophie was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Logan sat at his kitchen table and opened the envelope Adriana had given him. Inside was a letter on Vale Industries letterhead, dated and signed in Adriana's distinctive handwriting. To whom it may concern, Logan Mercer has served as Senior Operations Manager at Vale Industries for 3 years. In that time, he has consistently demonstrated exceptional judgment, unwavering integrity, and a commitment to doing what is right even when it carries personal cost. Mr. Mercer is the kind of employee every company hopes to find and every leader hopes to develop. He brings not only technical excellence and strategic thinking to his work, but also a moral compass that guides every decision he makes. Any organization would be fortunate to have him. Respectfully, Adriana Vale, CEO, Vale Industries. Logan read it twice, then carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. He didn't think he'd need it. Jessica's offer seemed genuine, and his career appeared to be intact despite his fears. But he appreciated the gesture. More than that, he appreciated what the letter represented. Proof that doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it seemed like it might cost everything, could still lead somewhere good. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Saw your light on. Everything okay? Logan smiled and typed back, Everything's good. Really good. Thank you for asking. He turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, but not before stopping in Sophie's doorway one more time. She slept peacefully, her stuffed elephant clutched close, her breathing deep and even. This was what mattered. This child, this life, this quiet apartment full of love and safety and simple joys. Career success was wonderful, but it was secondary to being the kind of man his daughter could respect. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Logan felt like he'd earned that respect. He'd chosen integrity over opportunity, honesty over advancement, truth over performance, and somehow, impossibly, he'd been rewarded for it. Not because the universe was fair or because good deeds were always recognized, but because sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing led to the right outcome. Logan climbed into bed and closed his eyes, ready for whatever came next. The integration project consumed Logan's life for the next 2 weeks in ways he hadn't anticipated. The manufacturing partnership was more complex than Jessica Reeves had initially described. 3 different facilities across 2 states, each with their own protocols, union contracts, and management styles that needed to be harmonized into a single operational framework. It was the kind of challenge that would make or break a career, and Logan knew the entire leadership team was watching to see if he could handle it. He arrived at the office before sunrise and often didn't leave until after dark, his desk buried under logistics reports and compliance documents. The promotion came with a small team, 4 analysts who looked to him for direction, and the weight of their trust added to the pressure already sitting heavy on his shoulders. But no matter how demanding the work became, Logan never missed pickup at Sophie's school. That was the line he wouldn't cross, the boundary he'd set on his first day in the new position when Jessica had asked about his availability for late meetings. I need to be home by 6, he'd said firmly. My daughter has dinner at 6:30, homework after that, and bed by 8:30. I can work from home after she's asleep, I can start earlier in the morning, but I won't miss her evening routine. Jessica had studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I respect that. Make it work. So Logan made it work. He became a master of efficiency, learning to compress 8 hours of meetings into 5, to read reports during his lunch break, to delegate tasks he once would have handled himself. His team adapted to his schedule, learning to front-load their questions into morning sessions and send end-of-day summaries he could review after Sophie was tucked in bed. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. And it was working. On a Thursday afternoon in early December, Logan was deep in a conference call with the Wisconsin facility manager when Miranda appeared in his doorway, waving to get his attention. He muted his microphone. "What's up?" "Ms. Vale is here," Miranda said quietly. "She's asking to see you when you're free." Logan felt his heart skip. Adriana had been on leave for 2.5 weeks, and the office had settled into a new rhythm under Jessica's leadership. He hadn't expected to see her back so soon. "Tell her I'll be there in 15 minutes, he said. Miranda nodded and disappeared. Logan turned his attention back to the conference call, forcing himself to focus on production schedules and quality metrics while his mind spun with questions. Why was Adriana back early? What did she want to discuss? Had something gone wrong? The call ended exactly 14 minutes later. Logan straightened his tie, grabbed a notebook for appearance's sake, and headed to the executive floor. Adriana's office door was open. She sat at her desk, but the space around her looked different, less austere somehow. There were photographs on the credenza that hadn't been there before, personal touches that softened the corporate perfection. And Adriana herself looked transformed. She'd cut her hair shorter, just past her shoulders, instead of pulled back severely. She wore less makeup, or maybe just different makeup that made her look younger, more approachable. And when she looked up and saw Logan, her smile was genuine and warm. "Logan, thank you for making time." "Of course." He stepped inside, uncertain whether to sit or stand. "I didn't expect you back yet." "I wasn't planning to be." Adriana gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please sit. I'm not here in an official capacity. Jessica is still acting CEO for another week. I just needed to handle some personal business, and I wanted to check in with a few people." Logan sat, his notebook forgotten in his lap. "How are you?" Honest answer? Adriana's smile turned rueful. "I'm better. Not perfect, not completely healed, but better. I spent the first week angry at everything and everyone. The second week crying over things I didn't realize I'd lost. And this week, finally, I've started to feel like myself again. Not the person I was pretending to be, but who I actually am." "That sounds healthy." "It feels terrifying," Adriana admitted. "I saw a therapist 3 times a week. Did you know there's a name for what I was doing? Performative resilience, pretending to be strong instead of actually processing trauma." Logan thought about the months after Emma's death, about his own attempts to perform normalcy while grief ate him alive from the inside. "I know exactly what that is." "I thought you might." Adriana leaned back in her chair, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I heard about your promotion. Jessica says you're doing exceptional work on the integration project. It's challenging, but good. And you're still making it home for dinner with your daughter every night." It wasn't a question. Logan nodded anyway. "That's non-negotiable." "I know. Jessica told me about your boundaries. She was impressed." Adriana's voice softened. "Logan, do you know why I really wanted to see you today?" "To check in?" "To apologize. Properly this time, in person, without the chaos of that night clouding everything." Adriana stood and moved to the window, her silhouette backlit by the afternoon sun. "What I asked you to do at the gala, it was manipulative and selfish and completely inappropriate. I put you in an impossible position because I was too proud to deal with my own pain, and you—" She turned back to face him. "You gave me the gift of honesty when everyone else was giving me pity or judgment. You don't need to apologize again." "Yes, I do. Because I've spent the last 3 weeks in therapy understanding just how wrong I was. Not just in asking you to kiss me, but in the whole mindset behind that request. I was using you as a prop in some performance I'd convinced myself I needed to give, and you refused to be used. You saw me as a human being who deserved better than to debase myself for revenge." Logan felt uncomfortable with her gratitude, with being positioned as some kind of hero when he'd simply made the only choice his conscience would allow. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly. And that's remarkable in a world where people usually do what feels advantageous." Adriana returned to her desk, but didn't sit. Instead, she pulled a small envelope from her drawer and held it out to him. "This is for your daughter, Sophie, right?" Logan took the envelope, surprised. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside was a check made out to Sophie's school with a memo line that read, Butterfly Metamorphosis Classroom Kit and Science Program Funding. Logan stared at the amount, $500, then looked up at Adriana in confusion. I don't understand. I called the school to ask about volunteer opportunities. I'm trying to reconnect with the world outside corporate boardrooms, and I thought working with children might help with perspective. Adriana's smile was almost shy. The principal mentioned their science program was underfunded, and that one of the second-grade teachers had been trying to raise money for a butterfly kit. She mentioned your daughter by name, actually. Said Sophie Mercer was obsessed with the idea of watching caterpillars transform. Logan's throat tightened. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Not as payment for anything. Please don't see it that way. But because your daughter's teacher talked about her with such affection, and because small kindnesses matter. Let me do this small kindness. Thank you, Logan said quietly, feeling the weight of the gesture. Sophie is going to be over the moon. I'm glad. Adriana sat down again, her expression shifting to something more businesslike. Now, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. All right. When I come back next week, officially back, I mean, will it be awkward for you, having me as your CEO again after everything that happened? Logan considered the question carefully. The truth was complicated. Yes, he remembered that night, remembered the desperation in her eyes and the impossible choice she'd presented. But he also saw how much she'd changed in 3 weeks, how therapy and time had stripped away the brittle perfection and revealed someone more genuine underneath. It might be awkward at first, he said honestly, but I think we can work through it. You're a good CEO, Adriana. The company needs you. And what happened? We were both under stress, both dealing with difficult situations. I don't hold it against you. Even though I potentially could have destroyed your career? You could have, but you didn't, and you've more than made amends. Logan met her eyes steadily. I think we can move forward professionally, as long as we're both committed to being honest with each other. Adriana nodded slowly. Honesty. Yes. That's exactly what I need more of in my life. She glanced at the photographs on her credenza. Logan could see what looked like family pictures, maybe nieces or nephews. I'm rebuilding my life outside of work, reconnecting with my sister, spending time with her kids, joining a book club of all things, trying to remember who I was before I became obsessed with being the perfect CEO. That sounds good. It feels strange, but good strange if that makes sense. Adriana's smile was genuine. Thank you for taking the time to see me, Logan, and for being honest. Again, you seem to make a habit of that. Somebody has to, Logan said lightly, standing to leave. Wait, one more thing. Adriana picked up a folder from her desk. Jessica mentioned the Wisconsin facility is giving you trouble with the union contract integration. I dealt with a similar issue 3 years ago when we acquired the Portland plant. These are my notes from those negotiations. They might help. Logan accepted the folder, touched by the gesture. Thank you. I'll definitely use these. Good luck with the project. Jessica tells me you're exceeding expectations, but I know how challenging these integrations can be. Don't hesitate to ask for support if you need it. Logan left her office feeling lighter somehow, like a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying had finally lifted. The conversation had been professional, but warm, honest but kind. They could do this. Maintain a working relationship built on mutual respect instead of the toxic dynamics that had nearly consumed them both. He was halfway back to his own office when his phone buzzed. A text from Sophie's school, parent-teacher conference reminder, tomorrow, 4 p.m. Looking forward to discussing Sophie's progress. Logan swore under his breath. He'd completely forgotten about the conference, and tomorrow was the Wisconsin facility inspection that couldn't be rescheduled. He pulled up his calendar, trying to figure out how to make both work, when another text came through. Mrs. Chen. Saw your light on late again last night. You're working too hard, Logan. Don't forget to take care of yourself. He smiled despite his stress and typed back. I know. Thank you for caring. How would you feel about watching Sophie tomorrow night? I have a late work commitment. The reply came immediately. Of course. She can help me make dumplings. But Logan, you need rest too. Promise me you'll take a break soon. I promise, Logan typed, meaning it. The next day unfolded in a blur of crisis management and careful negotiation. The The Wisconsin facility inspection revealed compliance issues that needed immediate attention, and Logan spent 4 hours on site walking through production lines with the facility manager and union representatives, taking notes and asking questions while his team documented everything for the integration report. By the time he made it back to his rental car, it was 3:30, and he was exhausted, hungry, and still had an hour's drive back to the city. He'd missed Sophie's parent-teacher conference completely, had texted her teacher an apology and a request to reschedule, and felt the familiar guilt of prioritizing work over his daughter settling into his chest like lead. His phone rang as he pulled onto the highway. Jessica Reeves. "Tell me you have good news," Logan answered, putting her on speaker. "Define good," Jessica said dryly. "The union rep called me 20 minutes ago. Said you handled the inspection like a pro, and he's willing to move forward with the integration timeline if we address the compliance issues you identified." Logan felt relief wash through him. "That is good news." "It is. But Logan, you sound exhausted. When's the last time you took a full day off?" He tried to remember and came up blank. "I don't know. A few weeks?" "That's not sustainable. I need you sharp for the next phase of this project, which means I need you rested. Take tomorrow off, spend time with your daughter. Come back Monday ready to tackle the compliance fixes." "Jessica, I have 3 meetings scheduled, which I'll reschedule." "Logan, I'm serious. You're running yourself into the ground. And while I appreciate the dedication, it doesn't serve anyone if you burn out. Take tomorrow off." The call ended before Logan could argue further. He drove the rest of the way home in thoughtful silence, Jessica's words echoing in his head. She was right. He was exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline and the fear of failing at this opportunity he'd been given. But the thought of taking a full day off felt impossible when there was so much work to be done. Mrs. Chen had Sophie fed and happy by the time Logan arrived home at 7:30. His daughter launched herself at him with her usual enthusiasm, chattering about the dumplings they'd made and a story her teacher had read at school. "And Miss Peterson said we're getting the butterfly kit." Sophie's eyes were huge with excitement. "Someone donated money for the whole science program, and we're getting butterflies and a microscope and everything." Logan caught Mrs. Chen's eye over Sophie's head, and she smiled knowingly. "Somebody's guardian angel is watching out," the older woman said softly. After Mrs. Chen left and Sophie was in her pajamas, Logan sat on the edge of his daughter's bed for their nightly routine. Usually, Sophie chose the book. She was reading above grade level and proud of it, but tonight she wanted to talk instead. "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, her small face serious in the lamplight. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Why?" "You look tired, and you've been working a lot, Mrs. Chen says you're working too hard." Logan's chest tightened. "I have been working a lot lately, but it's important work, and it won't always be this busy." "Is it because of money? Are we poor?" Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper on the last word, like poverty was something shameful. "No, baby, we're not poor. We have everything we need." "Then why do you have to work so much?" It was a fair question, and Logan struggled to find an answer that would make sense to a 7-year-old. The truth was complicated. He worked hard to build a better future, to prove himself worthy of the opportunity he'd been given, to honor Emma's memory by being the kind of father who provided stability and security. But Sophie didn't need complicated truth. She needed simple reassurance. "I work hard because I want to give you a good life," Logan said, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "But you're right. I have been working too much lately. So, guess what?" "What?" "I have tomorrow off, the whole day. We can do whatever you want." Sophie's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Anything?" "Within reason," Logan amended, already regretting the open-ended offer. "Can we go to the Science Museum? They have a butterfly exhibit, and Miss Peterson said it shows the whole life cycle, and I really want to see it before we get our caterpillars, so I know what to expect," Logan laughed, pulling her into a hug. "The Science Museum it is. We'll make a whole day of it." Sophie squeezed him tight, her small arms fierce around his neck. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in the world." He tucked her in, turned off her lamp, and stood in her doorway for a moment watching her settle into sleep. This was why he worked so hard. For moments like this, for the security to give his daughter experiences and opportunities, for the promise of a future better than the present. But Jessica was right. He needed balance. He needed to remember that Sophie didn't need expensive things or a bigger house as much as she needed him present, engaged, and not running on empty. The next morning dawned clear and cold, winter settling into the city with serious intent. Logan and Sophie bundled up in coats and scarves and took the bus to the Science Museum, a sprawling building of glass and steel on the edge of downtown. Sophie was in heaven. She dragged Logan through exhibit after exhibit, reading every placard, asking questions he sometimes couldn't answer, her enthusiasm infectious and pure. The Butterfly Pavilion was everything she'd hoped for, a warm, humid room filled with plants and free-flying butterflies in every color imaginable. "Look, Daddy," Sophie pointed to a monarch resting on a hibiscus flower. "That one's getting ready to migrate. We learned about it in school." Logan watched his daughter's face, saw the wonder there, and felt something in his chest unclench. This was what mattered. Not quarterly reports or integration timelines, but this moment of joy, this connection with his child, this reminder that life was bigger than his job. They were standing near the metamorphosis display, glass cases showing caterpillars at different stages of transformation, when Logan heard a familiar voice behind him. "Sophie? Is that you?" He turned to find Adriana Vale standing there in jeans and a casual sweater, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. She held the hand of a small boy, maybe 5 years old, who was tugging impatiently toward the butterfly display. "Ms. Vale," Logan said, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Aunt Adri, I want to see the butterflies," the little boy whined. "In a minute, Marcus." Adriana squeezed his hand gently, and Logan noticed the boy shared her dark eyes and serious expression. "I'm with my nephew. My sister's kids are visiting for the weekend, and I promised them an outing." Sophie, never shy, stepped forward. "I'm Sophie. Are you my daddy's boss?" Adriana smiled, kneeling down to Sophie's level. "I am, and I've heard wonderful things about you. Your teacher says you're very excited about the butterfly project." "I am. Did you know that caterpillars basically dissolve inside their chrysalis and then rebuild themselves into butterflies? It's like magic, but it's actually science." "That is pretty amazing," Adriana agreed. "This is my nephew, Marcus. He's also very interested in butterflies." Young Marcus had given up waiting and was now pressed against the glass of the nearest display case, watching a caterpillar munch on a leaf. Sophie immediately joined him, and the two children started comparing observations with the easy camaraderie of shared interests. Logan and Adriana stood together, watching them, the moment stretching into comfortable silence. "I'm glad you took the day off," Adriana said finally. "Jessica mentioned she ordered you to rest." "She did, and she was right. I needed this." Logan watched Sophie explain something to Marcus with animated hand gestures. "I've been so focused on the project that I forgot what I'm actually working for." "Purpose is easy to lose sight of when you're buried in logistics," Adriana said quietly. "I lost mine for a while. Forgot that building a company was supposed to be about creating value and supporting employees, not just chasing quarterly earnings and board approval." "Is that what you figured out during your leave?" "Part of it." Adriana's expression was thoughtful. "I figured out that I'd been measuring my worth by all the wrong metrics. Success wasn't making me happy because I'd defined success as being perfect, and perfection is impossible. So I was constantly failing at my own standard while everyone else thought I was succeeding." Logan understood that better than he wanted to admit. "What metrics are you using now?" "Simpler ones. Am I being honest? Am I being kind? Am I present in my own life instead of performing it?" Adriana smiled. "My therapist would be proud of me for articulating that." "It sounds healthy." "It sounds terrifying," Adriana corrected, "but less terrifying than the alternative." Marcus ran back to his aunt, tugging on her sleeve. "Aunt Adri, Sophie says they're getting real caterpillars at her school. Can we get caterpillars?" "We'll see," Adriana said diplomatically. "Maybe we can ask your mom." "Mom always says no to pets," Marcus said sadly. Sophie joined them, looking up at Adriana with the direct assessment only children could pull off. "Are you sad? You look like you were sad, but now you're getting better." Logan opened his mouth to correct her. "Sophie, that's not polite." But Adriana held up a hand, her expression gentle. "You're very perceptive, Sophie. Yes, I was sad. I'm getting better now. My daddy was sad when my mommy died, Sophie said matter-of-factly. But he got better too. It takes a long time, though. Adriana's eyes met Logan's over Sophie's head, and he saw understanding there, recognition of shared grief and the long road of healing. Your daughter is remarkable, Adriana said softly. She is, Logan agreed, putting his hand on Sophie's shoulder. She keeps me honest. They spent another hour at the museum, the children running ahead from exhibit to exhibit, while Logan and Adriana followed at a more leisurely pace. They talked about small things, weekend plans, favorite exhibits, the challenges of child wrangling, and larger ones too. Adriana mentioned she was thinking about restructuring the board, bringing in members who valued sustainability and employee welfare over pure profit margins. Logan talked about his plans for the integration project, the vision he had for creating a unified culture across all three facilities. It was easy, this conversation. Professional enough to maintain boundaries, but personal enough to feel real. They were finding a new equilibrium, a way to be CEO and employee. Acquaintances moving toward friendship, two people who'd seen each other at rock bottom and chosen honesty over judgment. When it was time to leave, Marcus threw a minor tantrum about wanting to stay longer, and Adriana handled it with patient firmness that impressed Logan. She acknowledged his feelings, set a clear boundary, and followed through despite his protests. You're good with him, Logan said as they walked toward the exit. I'm learning. I was never around kids much before this year. Too busy working. Adriana smiled ruefully. Now I have Marcus and his sister over every other weekend. It's chaotic and exhausting, and I love it. Outside, the winter afternoon had turned gray and cold. Logan helped Sophie into her coat while Adriana did the same for Marcus. Thank you, Adriana said as they stood on the museum steps, for being gracious about running into us. I wasn't sure if you'd want to interact outside of work. It was good, Logan said honestly. For both of us, I think, to see each other as regular people instead of boss and employee for a few hours. Regular people, Adriana repeated. I like that. She offered her hand, formal despite the casual setting. Have a good rest of your weekend, Logan. You've earned it. Logan shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip and the genuine warmth in her smile. Whatever had broken between them that night at the gala, they were building something new in its place, something better, something honest. He and Sophie took the bus home through the darkening afternoon, his daughter chattering about everything she'd learned and seen. Logan listened with half his attention, the other half thinking about Adriana and the unexpected gift of running into her outside the confines of work. Seeing her with her nephew, casual and relaxed, had revealed dimensions to her character he'd never seen in the office. She was rebuilding her life with intentionality, choosing connection over perfection, presence over performance. It gave Logan hope that people could change, that mistakes didn't have to define you, that honesty and vulnerability could lead to something better than the brittle armor most people wore. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Logan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea and his laptop, reviewing the compliance issues from Wisconsin. But his mind kept drifting back to the museum, to the easy conversation with Adriana, to the way Sophie had asked her if she was sad with such uncomplicated compassion. His daughter was teaching him as much about integrity as he was teaching her. Maybe more. Logan closed his laptop and pulled out his phone, typing a quick message to Jessica. Thank you for forcing me to take the day off. You were right, I needed it. Her response came quickly. Good, now get some sleep. Monday's going to be intense. Logan smiled and headed to bed, feeling more rested than he had in weeks despite not having done anything particularly relaxing. Sometimes rest wasn't about inactivity. It was about remembering what mattered, reconnecting with purpose, choosing presence over productivity. He fell asleep thinking about butterflies and metamorphosis, about the way caterpillars dissolved completely before rebuilding themselves into something capable of flight. Maybe people weren't so different after all. Monday arrived with the weight of accumulated responsibility and a confidence Logan hadn't felt in weeks. The day off had done more than rest his body. It had reminded him why he was doing this work in the first place, what he was building toward, and who he was building it for. The integration project moved into its critical phase with surgical precision. Logan's team implemented the compliance fixes in Wisconsin, negotiated contract modifications with the union representatives, and began the delicate process of harmonizing 3 different corporate cultures into a single operational framework. It was exhausting work, but the kind of exhaustion that felt earned, purposeful. Adriana returned to her role as CEO the following week, and the office immediately felt the shift. She was different, more accessible, more willing to admit uncertainty, quicker to laugh at herself when things went sideways. In her first all-hands meeting back, she'd stood at the podium without notes and talked about what she'd learned during her leave. "I went to therapy," she'd said bluntly, and Logan had watched the room ripple with surprise. 3 times a week, because I realized I'd spent years performing strength instead of actually being strong. And the difference matters. She talked about work-life balance, about the importance of mental health, about creating a culture where people didn't have to choose between career success and personal wellness. And she'd announced new policies, mandatory vacation time, expanded parental leave, mental health days that didn't count against sick leave. The board had apparently fought her on every point. She'd won anyway. Logan watched her lead with this new vulnerability as strength approach and found himself respecting her more, not less. She was proving that honesty didn't make you weak. It made you human, and humanity was what people actually needed from their leaders. December slid into January with relentless speed. The caterpillars arrived at Sophie's school, and his daughter became obsessed with their transformation, coming home every day with updates on their progress. "Daddy, 3 of them made chrysalises today," she'd announce, bouncing with excitement. "Miss Peterson says there'll be butterflies in 2 weeks." Logan would listen to every detail, watching his daughter's face light up with wonder, and feel grateful for whatever impulse had made Adriana fund the science program. It was a small thing, really. $500 meant nothing to a CEO's salary, but it had given Sophie this joy, this sense of possibility. On a Friday in mid-January, Logan was reviewing quarterly projections with his team when his office phone rang. Miranda, Adriana's assistant. "Mr. Mercer? Miss Vale would like to see you when you have a moment." Logan glanced at his calendar. "I can come up now if that works." "Perfect. She's expecting you." Logan excused himself from the meeting and took the elevator to the executive floor, wondering what this was about. He and Adriana had settled into a comfortable professional relationship over the past month. Respectful, collaborative, but with clear boundaries. They didn't socialize outside of work, didn't have personal conversations in the hallways. It worked. Adriana's office door was half open. She waved him in when she saw him, finishing up a phone call with what sounded like a board member. Logan studied the space while he waited, noting the changes she'd made since her return. The photographs were still there, her sister's family, smiling and candid. But she'd also added art to the walls, colorful abstract pieces that softened the corporate austerity. "Sorry about that," Adriana said, hanging up. "Board drama. Some things never change." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit. I have a proposition for you." Logan sat, suddenly nervous. "What kind of proposition?" "The integration project wraps up next month, and you've exceeded every metric we set. The facilities are operating as a unified system. The union contracts are solid, and employee satisfaction surveys are actually up across all 3 locations." Adriana leaned forward, her expression serious. "Jessica and I have been discussing next steps for you, and we'd like to offer you a position as Director of Operations. It's a significant promotion. You'd be overseeing all our manufacturing operations, not just the integration project." Logan felt his breath catch. Director level was executive territory, the kind of position that came with real influence and the salary to match. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Adriana said, "because I want to be transparent about what this role entails. You'd have more responsibility, more travel, more demands on your time. And I know how seriously you take your commitment to your daughter. I won't offer you this position unless I'm confident you can succeed without sacrificing your personal priorities." "What would the travel look like?" "Once a month, maybe twice during busy periods, 2 or 3 days at most. And we'd work with your schedule. No travel during Sophie's school breaks. Flexibility around her important events." Adriana pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "This is the full proposal. Compensation, benefits, team structure, everything. Take the weekend to review it. Talk it over with whoever you need to talk it over with. And if you have concerns, we'll address them before you make a decision. Logan accepted the folder, his mind already spinning. Can I ask why you're offering this to me? There are people with more experience, more tenure. Because you have something they don't, Adriana interrupted. Integrity. You make decisions based on what's right, not what's advantageous. You lead by example instead of by authority. And you understand that people are humans first and employees second. She paused, her expression softening. That night at the gala, you could have done what I asked. It would have been easy. It might have helped your career, but you chose honesty instead, even when it could have cost you everything. That's the kind of judgment I want in my leadership team. Logan felt his throat tighten. I was just doing what felt right. Exactly. And that's why I'm offering you this role. Adriana stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Take the weekend. Think about it. And Logan, whatever you decide, it won't affect our working relationship. If you're not ready for this level yet, or if the travel doesn't work with your family situation, I'll respect that. Logan left her office with the folder clutched in his hand and his heart pounding in his chest. Director of Operations. It was the kind of opportunity he'd never imagined reaching this early in his career, the kind of position that could change everything for him and Sophie. But it also meant more responsibility, more pressure, more time away from home. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, Logan sat at his kitchen table with the proposal spread out in front of him. The numbers were staggering, nearly double his current salary, plus bonuses tied to performance metrics. There was a relocation assistance package if he wanted to move closer to company headquarters, education benefits that would cover Sophie's college entirely, healthcare that was somehow even better than what he already had. It was everything he'd been working toward, everything he'd sacrificed for. And it terrified him. Logan pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment, then made a call he hadn't made in months. Emma's mother answered on the third ring. Logan, is everything all right? Is Sophie okay? Everyone's fine, Patricia. I'm sorry for calling so late. I needed to talk something through, and I thought of you. Patricia's voice softened. Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? Logan explained the offer, the opportunity, the conflict he was feeling between ambition and presence. Patricia listened without interrupting, the way she always had. And when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What would Emma say? She asked finally. Logan closed his eyes, thinking of his wife, of her practical wisdom and her fierce love for their daughter. She'd tell me to take the job. She always believed I could do more than I thought I could. But she'd also remind me that Sophie only gets one childhood, that there's no promotion worth missing it for. So you already know your answer, Patricia said gently. You're just scared to trust yourself. I don't want to make the wrong choice. Logan, honey, there is no wrong choice here. There's just the choice that fits your life right now. And only you know what that is. She paused, and he heard her take a sip of something. Tea, probably. The way she always drank in the evenings. But let me ask you this. If you say yes, can you do it without sacrificing the father you've promised Sophie you'll be? That was the question, wasn't it? Logan looked at the proposal again, at the travel requirements and the expanded responsibilities, and tried to imagine it alongside Sophie's soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and the bedtime routine that anchored both their lives. I think so, he said slowly. If I set firm boundaries and stick to them, if I'm honest about my limitations and don't pretend I can be everywhere at once, then you have your answer. They talked for another 20 minutes, Patricia sharing stories about Emma's own career struggles, the choices she'd made between ambition and motherhood, the regrets she'd carried, and the victories she'd celebrated. By the time Logan hung up, he felt clearer, more settled. He spent the weekend researching, planning, making lists of conditions and boundaries he'd need in place before accepting the role. He talked to Mrs. Chen about whether she could handle more frequent overnight stays with Sophie. He looked at his calendar and mapped out the next 6 months, identifying conflicts and flexibility points. And on Saturday afternoon, he sat down with Sophie at the kitchen table with paper and crayons and asked her to help him make a decision. Daddy might get a new job, he explained. It's a really good job that would help us save more money for the future. But it would also mean I have to travel sometimes, go to other cities for a few days and leave you with Mrs. Chen. Sophie frowned, considering this seriously. How many days? Maybe once a month, 2 or 3 days at a time. Would you miss my soccer games? Never, I promise. I wouldn't travel during your season, and I'd always be home for important things. Sophie picked up a green crayon and started drawing what looked like a butterfly. Would we still have breakfast together? Every morning I'm in town. And bedtime stories? Always. Sophie added purple to her butterfly, her small face scrunched in concentration. Then I think you should take the job, Daddy, because you work really hard and you should get good things. And I like Mrs. Chen. She teaches me how to make dumplings. Logan felt his chest swell with love for this child, for her generous heart and her simple wisdom. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Miss Peterson says I'm reading at a 4th grade level. Monday morning, Logan knocked on Adriana's office door with his answer prepared and his conditions clear. I'd like to accept the position, he said without preamble, but I need to set some boundaries first. Adriana gestured for him to sit, her expression interested. I'm listening. Logan pulled out the list he'd made over the weekend. No travel during Sophie's soccer season, which runs March through May. No trips longer than 3 days, unless absolutely critical. All travel scheduled at least 2 weeks in advance so I can arrange childcare. And if there's ever a conflict between a work commitment and a family commitment, family wins. No exceptions. He looked up from his list, meeting Adriana's eyes. I know that might sound unreasonable for a director-level position, but those are my terms. I won't take this job if it means becoming the kind of father who's always choosing work over his daughter. Adriana was quiet for a moment, and Logan braced himself for pushback, for negotiation, for the argument that executives couldn't afford such rigid boundaries. Instead, she smiled. Done. All of it. And I don't think it's unreasonable at all. I think it's the kind of clarity every employee should bring to these conversations. She pulled out a contract from her desk drawer. I already had HR build those conditions into the offer letter, along with one more thing you didn't ask for. Logan took the contract, scanning it quickly. What am I looking at? A childcare stipend, monthly allocation to help cover Mrs. Chen's time when you travel for work. It's not much, but it should help offset the additional costs. Logan stared at the number, feeling overwhelmed. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. If I'm asking you to travel for company business, the company should help support the family arrangements that make that travel possible. Adriana leaned back in her chair. Logan, I meant what I said about wanting leaders who understand that employees are humans first. That means putting my money where my mouth is. Literally. Logan signed the contract before he could second-guess himself, his hands steady despite the enormity of what he was committing to. Director of Operations. It felt surreal. Welcome to the executive team, Adriana said, shaking his hand across the desk. We have our first leadership retreat next month. 3 days in Colorado. Can Mrs. Chen handle that time frame? I'll make it work. Good. Because we're restructuring the entire operational framework, and I need your input on the new model. The transition into his new role happened faster than Logan expected. Within 2 weeks, he had a corner office on the executive floor, a team of 12 reporting directly to him, and a calendar full of strategic planning sessions that stretched into early evening. The work was intense, challenging in ways that pushed him to grow, but he held firm to his boundaries. When Sophie had a soccer game, he left the office at 3:30 without apology. When parent-teacher conferences came up, he blocked out his calendar and didn't reschedule. And when his team needed him to travel to the Oregon facility, he made sure it was during a week when Sophie's school had a short break and Mrs. Chen could take her to visit her grandmother. February brought the leadership retreat in Colorado, and Logan found himself in a ski lodge conference room with the rest of Vail Industries' executive team, discussing 5-year strategic plans and market expansion. It was strange being part of these conversations, offering input on decisions that would affect hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. But stranger still was the way Adriana ran the meetings. She asked questions instead of giving orders. She admitted uncertainty and invited debate. And when Logan pushed back on a proposed policy that would require mandatory overtime in the manufacturing facilities, she didn't shut him down. She listened. The workers are already at capacity, Logan argued, his presentation slides backing up his concerns with data. Adding mandatory overtime will lead to burnout, safety issues, and ultimately lower productivity. We'd be better off hiring additional shifts. That impacts our bottom line, the CFO countered. Additional headcount means increased labor costs. Short term, yes, Logan agreed. But long-term, we reduce turnover, improve safety metrics, and maintain quality standards. The ROI is there if we're patient. The debate continued for another 20 minutes, voices occasionally rising with passion, but Adriana moderated with a firm hand. In the end, they voted to pilot Logan's approach at one facility and measure the results before scaling. It was a compromise, but it felt like a victory. That evening, after the formal sessions ended, the leadership team gathered in the lodge's bar for drinks and casual conversation. Logan nursed a ginger ale, still never alcohol at company events, and found himself on the lodge's deck with Adriana, both of them watching the sun set over the mountains. "You held your ground in there today," Adriana said. "Some of the other executives were ready to steamroll you, but you didn't back down. I had the data to support my position. You also had the courage to use it." Adriana turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. "Can I ask you something personal?" Logan tensed slightly. They'd maintained careful professionalism since her return, rarely venturing into personal territory. "Sure. Do you ever regret it? Saying no that night at the gala?" Logan thought about it honestly. No, it was the right thing to do. Even though it could have destroyed your career? Even then, he met her eyes steadily. "My daughter is going to grow up and ask me about the choices I made. I want to be able to look her in the eye and tell her I always chose integrity, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard." Adriana nodded slowly. "I think about that night a lot. About how close I came to compromising both of us because I was too afraid to face my own pain. And I'm grateful, more than I can adequately express, that you had the strength to refuse me. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but you accelerated the timeline. You forced me to confront what I was doing, who I was becoming." She looked out at the mountains, her profile sharp against the fading light. "I've been in therapy for 4 months now, every week. And one of the things my therapist keeps coming back to is that moment, you telling me I was better than using people. It was the first time in years someone had seen past my performance to who I actually was." Logan felt uncomfortable with the weight of her gratitude. "I just told you the truth." "Exactly. And truth is the rarest gift anyone can give." Adriana turned back to him. "I want you to know something, Logan. Whatever success you achieve in this company, you've earned it. Not because you refuse to kiss me, but because you're genuinely exceptional at what you do. Don't ever let anyone, including yourself, question that." "Thank you," Logan said quietly. They stood in companionable silence as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the temperature dropped sharply. Finally, Adriana shivered and headed back inside, leaving Logan alone with his thoughts. He pulled out his phone and found a text from Mrs. Chen with a photo attached. Sophie at the kitchen table, surrounded by books and papers, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she worked on homework. "Your girl is a scholar," Mrs. Chen had written, "and she misses you. Call before bed?" Logan smiled and headed inside to make the call, grateful for video chat technology that let him read Sophie a bedtime story from 1,000 miles away. The retreat ended Sunday afternoon and Logan flew home through a snowstorm, landing 2 hours late but still in time to pick Sophie up from Mrs. Chen's apartment for their weekly Sunday dinner tradition. "Daddy!" Sophie launched herself at him in the hallway, and Logan caught her up in a bear hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "Hey kiddo, I missed you." "I missed you too. Guess what? 2 of the butterflies came out of their chrysalises, and they're so pretty, Daddy. They're orange and black, and Miss Peterson let me hold one on my finger." They walked home together through the cold evening, Sophie chattering nonstop about butterflies and school, and the new girl in her class who didn't speak English yet, but was really good at math. Logan listened to every word, feeling the tension of the retreat drain away with each block they walked. This was his purpose. Not the corner office or the executive title, but this, being present for his daughter's excitement, bearing witness to her growth, showing up for the small moments that comprised her childhood. March arrived with unseasonable warmth and the start of Sophie's soccer season. Logan kept his promise, blocking out every Saturday for games and never scheduling work travel during those precious weeks. He stood on the sidelines with the other parents, cheering when Sophie scored her first goal of the season, commiserating when her team lost in overtime. And on a Saturday morning when Sophie's team had a bye week, Logan got a phone call that changed the comfortable rhythm he'd built. "Mr. Mercer?" This is Principal Rodriguez from Sophie's school. I'm calling with an opportunity I thought might interest you. Logan put down his coffee, immediately alert. Is Sophie okay? Oh yes, she's wonderful. This is about something else entirely. Principal Rodriguez cleared her throat. We're launching a STEM mentorship program for our students, pairing them with professionals in science and technology fields. Ms. Vale suggested you might be willing to volunteer as a mentor. She spoke very highly of your work and your rapport with young people. Logan was surprised Adriana had thought of him, touched by the recommendation. What would it involve? Once a month, you'd meet with a student or small group of students to discuss your career, help with science projects, provide guidance. An hour of your time, usually during lunch so it doesn't interfere with the school day. I'd love to, Logan said immediately. Thank you for thinking of me. 2 weeks later, Logan found himself back at Sophie's school during his lunch break, sitting in the library with 3 second graders who were building a model bridge out of popsicle sticks. But why does the triangle make it stronger? Asked a serious-faced boy named Marcus. Logan pulled out a piece of paper and started drawing, explaining load distribution and structural integrity in terms a 7-year-old could understand. The kids were fascinated, asking question after question, and by the time the lunch period ended, Logan realized he'd enjoyed it more than any executive meeting. He was packing up his materials when someone spoke behind him. You're a natural at this. Logan turned to find Adriana standing in the library doorway, young Marcus, her nephew, at her side. I didn't know you were here, Logan said, surprised. I volunteer too. Reading program for the kindergartners. Adriana smiled at the children clustering around Logan. Though I have to say, bridge engineering sounds more exciting than the very hungry caterpillar. Aunt Adri, that's Mr. Mercer, Marcus said excitedly. From the museum. He's teaching us about bridges. I know, sweetheart. We work together. Adriana's expression was warm as she looked at Logan. Sophie must love having you here. She doesn't know yet. I'm surprising her next month when her class does their presentations. She'll be thrilled. Adriana checked her watch. I should get back to work. But Logan, thank you for doing this. These kids need role models who will show up consistently. It matters more than you know. Logan watched her leave, struck again by how much she'd changed. The CEO, who'd asked him to kiss her at a gala 6 months ago, felt like a different person entirely from the woman who now spent her lunch breaks reading to kindergartners. People could change. They could choose growth over comfort, vulnerability over performance, honesty over image. It gave Logan hope for his own continued evolution, for the person he was still becoming. That evening, Sophie noticed the popsicle stick residue on Logan's sleeve and demanded to know where it came from. He told her about the mentorship program, and her face lit up with pure delight. You were at my school, teaching kids about bridges? That's so cool, Daddy. I'll be there once a month. And next month, during your science fair, I'll get to see your butterfly project. Sophie threw her arms around his neck. You're the best daddy in the whole world. Logan held her tight, feeling the truth of everything he'd chosen settle into his bones like certainty. The promotions, the salary, the executive title, all of it mattered less than this moment, this hug, this child who trusted him completely. He'd made the right choices, all of them, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. And whatever came next, he'd keep making them the same way, with integrity as his compass and his daughter's respect as his North Star. Spring arrived in waves of warmth and color, the city shaking off winter's gray weight like a coat no longer needed. The trees along Sophie's school route burst into bloom, and Logan found himself noticing details he'd been too exhausted to see during the harsh months of the integration project. The way morning light caught on puddles, the sound of children's laughter spilling from playground gates, the simple pleasure of walking without hunching against the cold. The manufacturing facilities were running smoothly under the unified operational framework Logan had built. Employee satisfaction scores were up across all 3 locations. Safety incidents were down, and productivity metrics exceeded every projection Jessica had made when she'd first offered him the director position. The board had stopped questioning Adriana's decision to promote him and started asking when they could replicate his leadership model in other divisions. But success, Logan was learning, came with its own complications. On a Tuesday morning in late April, he sat in Adriana's office reviewing quarterly results when she dropped a folder on the desk between them with unusual heaviness. I need your honest opinion on something, she said, and Logan heard the tension underneath her controlled tone. He opened the folder and scanned the contents. A proposal for a major acquisition, a smaller competitor whose technology would complement Vail Industries' existing product line. The numbers looked solid, the strategic fit was clear, but something in Adriana's expression told him this wasn't a simple business decision. "What am I missing?" Logan asked. Adriana leaned back in her chair, her fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the armrest. "The company we're looking to acquire, it's run by Marcus, my ex-husband." Logan felt his stomach drop. "The same Marcus who showed up at the gala with—" "Yes, that Marcus." Adriana's smile was tight and humorless. "His company is struggling. Not failing, but struggling enough that our acquisition offer is probably his best exit strategy. The board thinks it's perfect. We get the technology we need, he gets bought out at a fair price, everyone wins. Except you'd be working with your ex-husband. Technically, he'd be working for me. The acquisition terms include a 2-year transition period where he stays on as a consultant." Adriana stood and moved to the window, her silhouette tense against the morning light. "The board approved it unanimously. Jessica thinks I'm overthinking it, but I keep wondering if I'm making a business decision or an emotional one, and I can't tell the difference anymore." Logan studied the proposal more carefully, looking past the surface numbers to the underlying dynamics. "What does your therapist say?" Adriana laughed, sharp and surprised. "She says I need to examine why I'm so uncomfortable with the idea of having professional power over someone who once had personal power over me." "That sounds insightful." "It sounds terrifying." Adriana turned back to face him. "Logan, I need you to tell me the truth. Is this a good acquisition on its merits, or am I letting ego drive this decision? Because if it's ego, if I'm doing this to prove something to Marcus or to myself, then I need to walk away." Logan spent the next 20 minutes asking questions, digging into the proposal's assumptions, challenging the projections. Adriana answered each one with the kind of detailed knowledge that came from weeks of analysis, and gradually, Logan began to see the shape of what she was really asking him. She didn't need his opinion on the business case. She needed permission to trust herself. "The acquisition makes sense strategically," Logan said finally. "The technology fits our roadmap, the price is fair, and the transition timeline is reasonable. But you're right to question your motivations. So let me ask you this. If this company was run by a stranger, would you move forward?" Without hesitation. "Then the question isn't whether to acquire it. The question is whether you can maintain professional boundaries with Marcus during the transition period." Adriana was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I don't know. Part of me wants to prove I'm completely over him, that I can work with him without it affecting me. But another part of me thinks that's exactly the kind of performance I'm supposed to be moving away from." "So don't perform," Logan said simply. "Be honest about the complexity. Tell the board you'll move forward with the acquisition, but you need clear boundaries around your ex-husband's involvement. Make Jessica the primary contact. Limit your direct interaction to what's absolutely necessary." "That feels like admitting weakness." "No, it feels like admitting humanity. There's a difference." Adriana smiled, real warmth breaking through the tension. "You have a gift for cutting through my nonsense, you know that? It's what you pay me for. Among other things." But she sat back down, pulling the folder toward her and making notes in the margins. "Thank you, Logan. I'll talk to the board about restructuring the transition plan." Logan stood to leave, but Adriana stopped him with a question that seemed to come from nowhere. "Are you happy? In this role, I mean. With everything that's changed?" The question caught Logan off guard. He thought about the corner office and the increased salary, about the challenges that pushed him to grow and the respect he'd earned from the executive team. But he also thought about the late nights reviewing reports after Sophie was asleep, the travel that took him away from home, the weight of decisions that affected hundreds of lives. "I think so," he said honestly. "Most days, but it's complicated." "How so?" Logan hesitated, unsure how much honesty was appropriate in this moment. Then he remembered that honesty was exactly what had brought them to this point, what had saved them both from the performance they'd been trapped in. "I'm proud of the work we're doing. I love the challenge, the strategy, the impact. But sometimes I wonder if I'm repeating the same mistakes everyone makes, choosing career over presence, sacrificing time with Sophie for professional achievement." He met Adriana's eyes. I promised myself I'd never become the kind of father who's always choosing work. But the line between commitment and obsession is thinner than I expected. Adriana nodded slowly, recognition in her expression. I spent 20 years on the wrong side of that line. It cost me my marriage and nearly cost me my sense of self. So let me tell you what I wish someone had told me back then. The work will always be there. There will always be another crisis, another opportunity, another reason to stay late or travel on weekends. But Sophie's childhood won't wait. Her soccer games and science fairs and bedtime stories, those moments are finite. Don't trade them for anything. Even success? Especially success. Adriana's voice was firm. Because success without presence is just an expensive way to be lonely. Trust me, I've lived that life, and it's not worth what you give up for it. Logan carried those words with him through the rest of the week, letting them settle into his thinking like sediment filtering through water. He started tracking his hours more carefully, noticing patterns he'd been too busy to see before. He was staying at the office later than necessary, checking email during Sophie's soccer practice, letting work bleed into spaces that should have been sacred. He was performing dedication instead of choosing balance. The realization hit him one evening when Sophie asked if he wanted to help her practice for the upcoming science fair, and his first instinct was to check his phone to see if he had any urgent messages. Actually, yes, Logan said, setting his phone face down on the table without looking at it. Show me what you've got. Sophie's butterfly project had evolved into an elaborate presentation complete with hand-drawn posters, a timeline of metamorphosis, and a brief speech she'd memorized about the importance of transformation in nature. She practiced for him 3 times, her confidence growing with each iteration, and Logan felt something shift in his chest. This was what mattered. Not quarterly reports or acquisition strategies, but this moment of his daughter's pride, her excitement, her trust that he would show up and pay attention. The science fair fell on a Thursday afternoon in early May. Logan blocked out his entire calendar, ignoring the raised eyebrows from colleagues who didn't understand why a director would take half a day off for a second-grade event. He arrived at the school 40 minutes early and found the gymnasium transformed into a maze of student projects, volcanoes and solar systems, plant growth experiments, and simple machines. Sophie's display was in the back corner, her butterfly posters carefully arranged around the empty chrysalises her class had donated to the fair. She stood beside her project in her best dress, fidgeting nervously until she saw Logan. "Daddy!" She ran to him and he caught her in a hug. "I was worried you'd be late." "I promised I'd be here, didn't I?" "I know, but you've been working so much lately, and I thought maybe—" Logan knelt down so they were eye level, his hands on her shoulders. "Sophie, listen to me. I will always show up for the important things. Always. Even if it means leaving work early or rescheduling meetings. You come first. Do you understand?" Sophie nodded, and Logan saw the relief flood her small face. It broke his heart a little, the realization that his daughter had started to doubt his promises, that work had crept far enough into their lives to make her question his priorities. "I'm sorry I've been distracted lately," he said quietly. "That's going to change. Starting now." The fair officially opened and parents began filtering through the displays. Logan stood beside Sophie's project, listening to her give her presentation over and over with increasing confidence. Other parents stopped to admire the butterflies, asking questions that Sophie answered with the kind of detailed knowledge that came from genuine passion. Logan was watching her explain the difference between a chrysalis and a cocoon to an impressed father when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "She's remarkable. You should be very proud." He turned to find Adriana standing there with young Marcus, both of them carrying clipboards with judging sheets attached. Logan's surprise must have shown on his face because Adriana smiled. "I'm one of the volunteer judges this year. My nephew's project is 3 rows over. He built a model of the solar system with actual rotating planets." She looked at Sophie's display, her expression warm. "Though I have to say, the butterfly metamorphosis presentation is giving him serious competition." Sophie, never shy, stepped forward. "Hi, Ms. Vale. Do you want to hear about how butterflies transform? It's really cool and kind of gross at the same time." "I would love to," Adriana said seriously, and Logan watched as his CEO knelt down to Sophie's level, giving her the same focused attention she brought to board meetings. Sophie launched into her presentation with renewed energy, and Logan found himself watching Adriana's face as much as his daughter's. 6 months ago, the woman kneeling here listening to a 7-year-old talk about butterflies had been drowning in performance and pain, asking him to help her stage a lie because she couldn't face her own vulnerability. Now she volunteered at elementary schools, spent weekends with her nibblings, led with honesty instead of armor. People could change. They could choose growth over comfort, truth over image, presence over performance. And sometimes those choices created unexpected connections. A CEO and a single dad who'd found friendship in the wreckage of mutual honesty. Sophie finished her presentation and Adriana stood, making thoughtful notes on her clipboard. "That was excellent, Sophie. Very thorough and well presented. Good luck with the judging." "Thank you," Sophie beamed, then turned to Logan. "Daddy, can we get ice cream after this, to celebrate?" "Absolutely. Any flavor you want." Adriana caught Logan's eye as she turned to leave, and something passed between them. Not romantic, not professional, but something warmer and more complicated. Respect, maybe. Gratitude for the honesty they'd chosen when lies would have been easier. Recognition of how far they'd both traveled from that desperate night at the gala. The fair wrapped up 2 hours later with Sophie winning an honorable mention ribbon that she clutched like a trophy. They went for ice cream as promised, sitting at a small table near the window while Sophie talked nonstop about the other projects she'd seen and the judges' questions and how nervous she'd been until she saw Logan in the crowd. "I'm really glad you were there, Daddy," she said seriously, chocolate ice cream dotting her upper lip. "Some kids' parents didn't come, and they looked so sad." Logan felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that came from loving someone so fiercely it physically hurt. "I'll always be there for the important things, sweetheart." "That's a promise." That evening, after Sophie was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Logan sat down with his laptop and did something he'd been avoiding for weeks. He opened his calendar and started blocking out non-negotiable family time. Every Saturday morning, every Tuesday and Thursday evening, every school event and soccer game and parent meeting. Then he sent an email to his team establishing new boundaries around his availability. It felt both terrifying and liberating to claim that space, to draw those lines in the sand. His phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Adriana. "Saw your calendar update. Good for you. Your team will adjust and Sophie will thank you someday." Logan smiled and typed back, "Learning from the best." The reply came quickly. "We're learning from each other. That's what makes it work." The acquisition of Marcus Vail's company moved forward over the next month with surgical precision and carefully maintained boundaries. Adriana restructured the transition plan exactly as Logan had suggested, making Jessica the primary contact and limiting her own involvement to quarterly check-ins. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still complicated emotions bubbling beneath the professional surface, but Adriana handled it with the same honesty she'd brought to everything else since her return. She admitted when it was hard. She asked for support when she needed it. She stopped performing strength and started choosing it. In late June, the Vail Industries Board announced a major restructuring that sent ripples through the entire organization. They were creating a new position, Chief Operating Officer, and after weeks of speculation about external candidates, they offered it to Jessica Reeves, which meant the CEO needed a new second-in-command. Logan was in a meeting with the Wisconsin facility manager when Miranda appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic but insistent. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Vail needs to see you immediately. She says it's urgent." Logan excused himself and took the elevator to the executive floor, his mind spinning through possible crises. But when he reached Adriana's office, she was smiling. "Close the door," she said. "This is going to take a while." Logan sat, confused and slightly nervous. "What's going on?" "The board approved a major organizational change this morning. Jessica is moving up to COO, which creates a vacancy in her current role." Adriana leaned forward, her expression serious despite the smile. "We want to offer you the position of Chief of Operations. You'd be overseeing all operational divisions, manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, everything. It's effectively the number 3 position in the company." Logan felt the air leave his lungs. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it. Because, Logan, I need to be clear about what this means. More responsibility, higher visibility, more pressure." but also more influence, more ability to shape this company's culture and values, and more flexibility, honestly. At the executive level, you set your own schedule more than you follow someone else's. What about travel? Same boundaries you established before. We'll work around your commitments to Sophie. I'm not interested in leaders who sacrifice their families for success. I'm interested in leaders who prove you can do both. Adriana pulled out a contract already prepared. Take the weekend, talk to Sophie, talk to Mrs. Chen, talk to whoever you need to talk to. But Logan, you've earned this. Not because you refused to kiss me at a gala, not because I owe you anything, but because you're exceptional at what you do and you lead with integrity that this company desperately needs. Logan took the contract home in a daze, barely remembering the drive. He sat at his kitchen table long after Sophie had gone to bed, staring at the numbers and the title and the impossible opportunity spread out before him. Chief of Operations. It was beyond anything he'd imagined when he'd first walked into that gala 8 months ago, beyond the most optimistic trajectory he could have planned. But it was also more time, more pressure, more risk of becoming the kind of father he'd promised himself he'd never be. This time, Logan didn't agonize over the decision alone. He called Patricia, Emma's mother, and talked through his fears and hopes. He spoke with Mrs. Chen about whether she could handle the increased childcare needs. He even talked to Sophie's teacher, asking for an honest assessment of whether his current work schedule was affecting his daughter. And on Saturday morning, he sat down with Sophie and laid out the choice in terms she could understand. This new job would be really important, he explained. I'd be helping make big decisions about the whole company, but it would also mean more responsibility, and I need to know if you think I can do it without forgetting what's most important. Sophie considered this with the seriousness she brought to all weighty matters. What's most important? You, Logan said without hesitation. You're always the most important thing. Then I think you can do it, Sophie said simply. Because you always keep your promises, Daddy. You said you'd never miss the important things, and you haven't, not once. Logan felt his throat tighten with emotion. What if I make mistakes? What if I get too busy sometimes? Then I'll tell you. Sophie's confidence was absolute. And you'll fix it, because that's what you do. You fix things. Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that adults complicated beyond recognition. Monday morning, Logan accepted the position. The announcement went out Tuesday afternoon, and Logan's phone exploded with congratulations from colleagues, questions from his team, and one text that made him smile despite the chaos. Adriana, welcome to the executive suite. Jessica is thrilled, the board is pleased, and I'm grateful. Dinner to celebrate? Nothing fancy. My treat. Bring Sophie. We're going for pizza. They met that Friday at a casual pizzeria near Sophie's school, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. Adriana arrived with Marcus and his older sister, and the children immediately bonded over their shared love of science and strange facts. Logan and Adriana sat at one end of the long table, while the kids argued happily about whether dolphins or octopi were smarter. And for the first time since that night at the gala, Logan felt like they were simply two people sharing a meal. Not CEO and employee, not boss and subordinate, but friends who'd survived something difficult together and come out stronger on the other side. I owe you an apology, Adriana said suddenly, her voice quiet enough that the children couldn't hear. Logan looked at her in surprise. For what? For putting you in an impossible position all those months ago. For asking you to compromise your integrity because I was too scared to face my own pain. I apologized before, but I don't think I really understood what I was asking of you until recently. What changed? Adriana glanced at the children, at young Marcus gesticulating wildly while explaining something about cephalopod intelligence. My therapist asked me what I would do if Marcus, my nephew, not my ex, asked me to lie for him someday. If he asked me to help him cheat or deceive someone because he was hurting and didn't know what else to do. And I realized I'd refuse. I'd tell him he was better than that pain doesn't justify dishonesty, that integrity matters more than convenience. She looked back at Logan, her eyes bright. That's exactly what you did for me. You refused to let me compromise myself, even when it would have been easier to just give me what I asked for. And I'm not sure I ever properly thanked you for that. You've thanked me plenty, Logan said. And honestly, Adriana, we've both changed so much since that night. I'm not sure those people even exist anymore. Maybe not. Adriana smiled. Maybe we're both still in the chrysalis, somewhere between caterpillar and butterfly. Logan laughed at the metaphor, and Sophie looked over from her debate with the other children. Daddy, are you talking about butterflies too? That's my thing. Everything's your thing, sweetheart, Logan said fondly. You're interested in everything. That's because everything is interesting, Sophie declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. They stayed at the pizzeria for 2 hours, the conversation flowing easily between adult topics and children's enthusiasms. Adriana talked about the acquisition timeline, about her sister's upcoming visit, about the book club she'd joined that was currently reading something dense and philosophical. Logan shared stories about the Wisconsin facility's latest improvements, about Sophie's upcoming soccer tournament, about the house with a yard he'd finally started seriously looking at. Normal life. Complicated and messy and real. When they finally left, the sun was setting over the city in shades of amber and rose. Adriana walked them to the bus stop, Marcus and his sister already arguing about what movie they'd watch when they got home. Thank you, Adriana said as the bus appeared in the distance, for being honest with me when I needed honesty, for pushing back when I needed boundaries, for being exactly the kind of leader this company needs. Thank you for trusting me with responsibility, and for showing me that people can change if they're brave enough to be honest about who they are. The bus pulled up, and Sophie tugged Logan's hand impatiently. But before they boarded, Adriana caught his arm. Logan? One more thing. That night at the gala, when you told me I was better than using people, it was the first time in years anyone had seen me as fully human instead of just a CEO. I want you to know that changed everything, not just my career, but my life. Logan felt the weight of her words, the gratitude and vulnerability in her expression. You would have found your way eventually. Maybe, but you made it sooner rather than later, and that matters. The bus driver honked impatiently, and Sophie pulled harder on Logan's hand. He climbed aboard with his daughter, finding seats near the window. As the bus pulled away, he watched Adriana standing on the sidewalk with her nibblings, waving until they turned the corner. 8 months ago, that woman had been drowning in performance and pain, asking him to help her stage a lie in front of hundreds of people. Now she was volunteering at elementary schools, leading with vulnerability, building a life instead of just a career. And Logan had played a role in that transformation, simply by refusing to let her compromise herself when it would have been so much easier to just say yes. Sometimes the right choice was the hardest one, but it was still right. The summer unfolded with the lazy warmth of long days and easy evenings. Logan settled into his new role with the same methodical precision he brought to everything, building teams and systems and processes that reflected his values. He hired with an eye toward diversity and promoted based on merit rather than politics. He established clear boundaries around work-life balance and refused to reward employees who sacrificed their families for their careers. And slowly, carefully, the culture began to shift. Sophie's soccer season ended with a tournament championship that she celebrated with typical 8-year-old enthusiasm: ice cream, a new book, and permission to stay up an extra hour. Logan framed her honorable mention ribbon from the science fair and hung it in his new office, a reminder of what actually mattered. In August, he closed on a house with a yard and good schools, the kind of place he'd been saving for since Sophie was born. It had a big kitchen and a backyard perfect for summer barbecues, and Sophie claimed the bedroom with the window seat before they'd even finished the tour. Mrs. Chen helped them move, directing the placement of furniture with the authority of someone who'd known them both for years. And on their first night in the new house, after Sophie was tucked into her new bed in her new room, Logan stood in the backyard and looked up at the stars visible beyond the city's light pollution. He'd done it. He'd built the life he'd promised Emma he would build, the stability he'd dreamed of providing for their daughter. Not through compromise or shortcuts, but through integrity and hard work and the courage to choose honesty even when it cost him. His phone buzzed with a text from Adriana. "Congratulations on the new house. Sophie showed me pictures. It's perfect. You've earned this, Logan. All of it." Logan smiled and typed back, "We both have. Thank you for trusting me to help build something good." The reply came quickly. "Thank you for refusing to let me destroy it." Some friendships are built on shared success. Ours is built on shared honesty. I think that's rarer and more valuable. Logan looked at that message for a long time, thinking about the journey they'd both taken from that desperate night at the gala to this moment of quiet triumph. They'd chosen truth over performance, vulnerability over armor, presence over perfection. And in doing so, they had both transformed, not in the instant metamorphosis of butterflies, but in the slower, harder work of human growth. September brought new beginnings. Sophie started third grade with her usual enthusiasm, her butterfly presentation from last year already legendary among the second grade teachers. Logan's operational frameworks were being adopted across all divisions of Vail Industries, improving efficiency and employee satisfaction in ways the board hadn't thought possible. And Adriana was thriving in a way Logan had never seen. She'd restructured the board to include more diverse voices, launched initiatives around mental health and work-life balance, and publicly credited her leave of absence with saving her career by teaching her to lead with humanity instead of perfection. In October, on the one-year anniversary of that fateful gala, Adriana called an all-hands meeting that packed the same conference room where she'd announced her leave of absence. "A year ago, I made some mistakes," she began, and Logan watched the room collectively hold its breath. "I let my personal pain interfere with my professional judgment. I performed strength instead of actually being strong, and I very nearly compromised someone's integrity because I was too afraid to face my own vulnerability." She looked directly at Logan then, and he saw gratitude and respect in her expression. "But someone had the courage to tell me I was better than that, to refuse to enable my worst impulses, to see me as fully human instead of just a CEO." Adriana's voice strengthened. That moment of honesty changed everything, not just for me, but for this entire organization. It forced me to examine the culture we were creating, the values we were actually living versus the ones we claimed to hold. She turned back to address the entire room. "So today, I'm announcing a new initiative. We're implementing a company-wide program focused on integrity in leadership, mental health support, and work-life integration. Because I want Vail Industries to be a place where people don't have to choose between success and humanity. Where honesty is rewarded more than performance. Where we measure success not just in quarterly earnings, but in the lives we're building and the people we're becoming." The applause started slowly, then built to something genuine and sustained. Logan felt his face flush as people turned to look at him. Everyone knew the story by now, filtered through office gossip and speculation, but he kept his eyes on Adriana. She was radiant with purpose, with the kind of leadership that came from earned wisdom rather than inherited authority. She'd transformed herself through brutal honesty and deliberate choice, and in doing so had transformed the organization she led. After the meeting, Logan stopped by her office to find her standing at the window, looking out over the city. "That was quite a speech," he said. Adriana turned, her smile soft and genuine. "It was true, every word of it. You've built something remarkable here, not just a successful company, but a culture that actually values people." "We've built it," Adriana corrected. "You and Jessica, and everyone who had the courage to choose honesty over convenience. I just finally learned to listen." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who'd survived their worst moments and come out stronger. "Can I ask you something?" Adriana said finally. "Always. Are you happy? Really, truly happy?" Logan thought about Sophie and her new house with the yard, about the career he'd built on integrity rather than compromise, about the friendships forged in honesty and the future unfolding with possibility. "Yes," he said simply. "I really am." "Good." Adriana's expression was warm with genuine affection. "You deserve it. You both do. You and Sophie. You've built something beautiful." Logan went home that evening to find Sophie waiting on the front porch with Mrs. Chen, both of them excited about something Logan couldn't immediately identify. "Daddy, guess what? Mrs. Chen and I planted a butterfly garden in the backyard. We got milkweed and everything so butterflies will come and lay eggs and we can watch them transform again." Logan looked past his daughter to the small plot of earth they'd turned over, already planted with the kinds of flowers and plants that attracted butterflies. It was a mess of dirt and hope, exactly the kind of project 8-year-olds and 70-something neighbors created when left unsupervised. "It's perfect," Logan said, pulling Sophie into a hug. "Absolutely perfect." That night, after Sophie was asleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home and the house was quiet around him, Logan stood in the backyard looking at the butterfly garden. The plants were small now, barely visible in the darkness, But by next spring, they'd bloom into something beautiful. And butterflies would come, drawn by instinct and biology to this small patch of earth where transformation happened in cycles ancient and endless. Logan thought about caterpillars dissolving completely in their chrysalises before rebuilding themselves into something capable of flight. He thought about the journey he and Adriana had both taken from performance to presence, from armor to honesty, from desperation to peace. People weren't so different from butterflies, really. Sometimes you had to fall apart completely before you could become something better. Sometimes transformation required darkness and vulnerability and the courage to trust that beauty waited on the other side of dissolution. Logan had chosen honesty when lies would have been easier. He'd refused to compromise when compromise would have been simpler. He'd set boundaries and kept promises and built a life based on integrity instead of convenience. And somehow, impossibly, it had all worked out. Not perfectly. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, still days when balancing career and fatherhood felt impossible. But he was happy. Sophie was thriving, and he could look at himself in the mirror every morning knowing he'd chosen the right things, made the hard decisions, stayed true to the values his daughter would someday judge him by. Inside the house, his phone buzzed with a final message from Adriana. "Thank you for being the kind of person who tells the truth even when it costs you. The world needs more of that. I needed more of that. Sleep well, friend." Logan smiled and typed back, "Thank you for being brave enough to listen, and for showing me that people can change if they're honest enough to try." He put his phone away and stood in the darkness a moment longer, feeling the spring breeze carry the promise of transformation, of growth, of all the butterflies yet to come. Tomorrow, he'd go back to work and tackle whatever challenges awaited. He'd attend meetings and make decisions and lead with the integrity that had brought him this far. Sophie would go to school and learn new things and come home full of questions and enthusiasm. Mrs. Chen would probably make dumplings and share wisdom disguised as small talk. Normal life. Complicated and messy and real and absolutely beautiful. But tonight, Logan just stood in his backyard and felt grateful for the journey that had brought him here, for the honesty that had saved them both, for the transformation that came from choosing truth over performance, presence over perfection, integrity over everything else. He'd been tested in a ballroom full of watching eyes, asked to compromise himself for convenience, invited to choose advancement over honesty, and he'd said no. That single word, that moment of refusal, had changed everything. Not just his career trajectory, but the entire arc of his life and Adriana's. It had sparked transformation in ways neither of them could have predicted, creating ripples that spread far beyond that desperate night. Logan went inside and locked the door, checking on Sophie one last time before heading to his own room. She slept peacefully, her stuffed elephant clutched close, her face peaceful in the dim glow of her nightlight. This was what mattered. This child, this life, this quiet house full of love and safety and simple joys. Everything else, the promotions and the salary and the corner office, were just tools to build this foundation, the space where his daughter could grow into whoever she was meant to become. Logan climbed into bed feeling the bone-deep satisfaction of a day well lived, a choice well made, a life well built. And in the morning, when Sophie came bouncing into his room full of excitement about butterfly gardens and school projects and all the infinite possibilities of a new day, Logan would be there to greet her. Present, engaged, honest, the way he'd promised her he would always be, the way he'd promised himself he would always be. The kind of man his daughter could respect, built not through performance or perfection, but through integrity, honesty, and the quiet courage to choose truth even when it cost him everything. Especially when it cost him everything. Because in the end, it had cost him nothing and gained him the world.